everybody. I'm Alyssa from Meditative Astrology. Today we're going to walk through the astrology of April 5th through 11th. We don't have a ton of transits that are going on, but I see this as a loud week because of the transits and the movements that we have going on. There's a lot of Mars energy that is going on here, and Mars is very loud. So it might seem like not a lot at first, but I think that this week has the potential to pack a bit of a punch. So we're going to get into all of that. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button so that way you don't miss anything we have going on here. These weekly videos, they come out every Saturday morning. And then we usually have a live meditation Sunday nights, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. I say usually because we are not going to have one this upcoming Sunday, which is Easter Sunday. Happy Easter to all of you that resonates with. But typically every Sunday we have a live meditation. There's also a day in April that we're not going to be having one. I always announce those on the live meditations in the weeks leading up to it. But you can find the most up-to-date information and announcements and other miscellaneous posts on our social media page. So Facebook, Instagram is a great place to connect for those things that will keep you updated on any schedule changes and whatnot. And then all of the content is posted here on YouTube. So let's connect on all of the things, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and then we can walk this astrological journey together. I would be ever so grateful to be able to do that with all of you. All right, let's go ahead and get right into this week here, shall we? We start out on Sunday with the sun perfecting its square to Jupiter. Now we talked about this some in last week's video because this was built into that Libra full moon that we had last week. So this has been building, but it comes through exact Sunday afternoon into Monday. So you might really be feeling this through the weekend. When you have Sun and Jupiter come together, you start to get questions or themes of the path that we're on, our life purpose, our life direction, maybe what illuminates us from inside. You get things related to knowledge and understandings and the lessons that we are learning. You get knowledge and insights that come through. Maybe there's some enlightenment themes that come through there, but really understanding the purpose and the path and the direction of which we're going down and the lessons that we've learned through our experiences. Maybe our connections with higher powers and sources when you're talking about Jupiter being the wise teacher and Sun being the infinite intelligence, the divine eternity that does not change. So these are the type of things that you can have when Sun and Jupiter start to come together. These two planets are coming together in a square, which is what is considered to be the closing square for these two planets, okay? So last year, in June of 2025, there was a seeding moment where Sun and Jupiter came together in early Cancer. I think it was at 3 degrees of Cancer, and it came together with a new moon. By the time they come back together again in a conjunction, Jupiter is going to have moved into the sign of Leo. So you get the seeding moment as Jupiter is fairly new to entering the sign of Cancer with the Sun, and then they go through a process, right? You go from the conjunction to an opening square to the opposition to the closing square, which is where we are now. And you can think about this as a process and the path of the Jupiterian Cancer transit that we've been having here going on for the last little while. The new moon period, which is the seeding moment, the conjunction between Sun and Jupiter, which we had last year, opens up the pathways and the purpose in the Cancer sector of our chart. So looking at the themes that Cancer can represent, our places of home, our places of safety, our places of origin and where we've come from, our own personal origin, as well as that which has come before us, so our ancestry. You get your memory bodies and your own emotional security in the sign of Cancer. So memory is conscious memories as well as those subconscious or unconscious conditionings that we all hold in some sort of way, whether we're aware of them or not. And then you can add in the house topics of where you can find, of the house where you find Cancer within your own chart. So if you take that and you look at something was started, something was initiated last year in June. And then in the fall time, we had the opening square, and there's some individuation, and there is this, you can start to see a process that is really starting to come together. And then you have the moment of opposition where both planets are speaking to each other in equal amounts. You get to the closing square, and Sun is in the superior position in the closing square, where in the opening square, where you have that individuation challenge, Jupiter is in the superior position. So the planet that's in the superior position speaks a little bit louder, has a little bit more to say. So seeding moment, they initiate. Opening square, Jupiter's in that superior position, maybe impressing something upon the sun and presenting some sort of path of knowledge or information or understandings, learning process that we are on. Coming through, you go into the opposition, and both planets are speaking both as loudly. That's where you can get the tension through there. That's like the full moon period of the cycle between these two planets. Now we're coming towards the closing square. That's where we find ourselves now. In the closing square, the sun is in the superior position. So the sun may have a little bit more to say to Jupiter, where in the beginning, Jupiter was speaking more to the sun. So with the sun speaking to Jupiter, the sun is asking a question of Jupiter, where it's something along the lines of, what have you given me that I can take forward with me from this process? What have we learned throughout the period of Jupiter being in the sign of Cancer? The closing square, the releasing moment, it's like the third quarter moon of a lunar cycle, is a releasing moment and a reflection moment as we prepare for the next cycle. Jupiter is going to be moving into the Leo house, where we're going to start learning lessons and having some teachings start to show their self to us in the Leo sector of our charts. So right now, as we're finishing up the Cancerian transit here, what have we learned? What have we experienced? The experience within the Cancer areas of our chart may be activated here, maybe the moon, because the moon is the ruler of the sign of Cancer, and then those Cancer topics like we mentioned earlier. Cancer represents that safe space for growth expansion, and it's the waters of birth into the physical realm. You can think about that summer solstice moment that we get at zero Cancer. It's in the heat of the sun in the northern hemisphere and within the zodiacal story of the sun. But it's the place where dark slowly, ever so slowly, starts to creep in, right? So we're slowly starting to move towards the dark half of the year, even though we are fully immersed in the middle of the light half of the year, and we have the longest day of the year. Slowly after that, we're going to start to lose minutes of the day if you live in the northern hemisphere. The dark half of the year represents the yin half of the year, or representing physical matter, where the light half of the year represents spirit or infinity or divinity. So this Cancer area, these birthing waters, right? It's the place that starts to bring us into the material world, into material form, in a water sign in the place of the moon. So this is where you start to get some of those Cancer topics that we have. The emotional realms of experience, conditionings, memory body, origin, nurturing influences, the care of others and the care of ourselves, these are all things that could have been coming up for us over the last little less than a year or so. Again, we're looking back to June of last year that this process has been going on. It is a square, so there could still be some challenges coming from the sign of Aries. Sun is in the sign of Aries and Jupiter's in the sign of Cancer. This is where it starts to feel a little Marsy, because Mars is the ruler of Aries. And squares are scratchy. They give us challenges, but they give us places to grow from. And if you think about Aries, Aries is the initiator, right? It's the one that will go to war for whatever it feels like it needs to accomplish. We say that squares are of the nature of Mars. Mars is the ruler of Aries, so you can start to see the correlations between these different astrological pieces here. So squares are spaces to be able to grow from, to individuate and initiate from. There may be loud, sudden challenges to our emotional integrity or safety when the sun is squaring Jupiter from the sign of Aries. Individuation and going our own way versus family and, maybe what traditions have been laid down before us are possible. And then the desire to strike a new path or remain in the spaces of comfort and familiarity. Again, Cancer represents those spaces of safety and can represent comfort in that type of way. So those are things that it's easy for us to move back to the safe spaces rather than going forward into some sort of challenge. So the sun in Aries may be really challenging us to take what we've learned and what we've experienced in the Jupiter sector of our chart, or the Cancer sector of our chart, and really pull it forward, really bring it into initiation. How can you bring that into a physical form, right? Aries and the sun are going to tell us to move forward, go in the direction that you feel pulled towards. And then Cancer representing that, those physical birthing water. So bringing it into physical form, into the material world, right? Into matter, which is related to the dark half of the year, where the light half of the year is related to the solar half of the year, or the realm of spirit, the realm of divinity. So really contemplating on what we've learned, what we've experienced, and what we've gained from that. Jupiter, we think of blessings, we think of positivity, we think of expansion, and we think of good things coming our way. We don't necessarily always think so much about the good things that can come from lessons, right? A lot of teachings that really bring us to the core of something can be hard lessons or can be sobering lessons at the same time. So if it doesn't feel like Jupiter in Cancer has been all sunshine and roses and supportive, I think about the grandmotherly wisdom that doesn't necessarily give you the exact answer, but gives you a path to go down to experience it yourself. And I have seen many people that have experienced the Jupiter in Cancer in that type of way. But really growing and proliferating that Cancer house within your own chart here. And then reflecting on that through the closing square as we get ready to start a new cycle, as Jupiter prepares to move into the sign of Leo, which we will speak about more as we get closer to that. So this is where we start out the beginning of the week here on Sunday. And then again, that goes into Monday as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring us, back to our main screen here. And then we go ahead and move forward into Monday. That square is still there. It's exact Sunday into Monday. So in addition to following the moon through the sign of Sagittarius, which is Jupiter's sign and gives a little bit of a echo back to the aspect that we have going on here. And then we go ahead and move forward into Tuesday, April 7th. We don't have any exact aspects that are going on here either. So then if we go ahead and move forward into Wednesday, that Sagittarian moon is going to move into the sign of Capricorn in the morning. And we have Mars sextiling Uranus from 29 degrees of Pisces, sextiling Uranus at 29 degrees of Taurus. The moon being in the sign of Capricorn at the time that this aspect goes exact, the place where Mars is exalted, and Mars is in the superior position. So again, just like the last aspect, Mars has a little bit more to say here, gives a little bit of extra empowerment or a little extra strength to Mars here. When we have these two planets coming together just before Mars moves into the sign of Aries, where it's really strengthened. Shortly before Uranus moves into the sign of Taurus, or into the sign of Gemini, which it's going to do at the end of this month. These planets are culminating. They're finishing up a process before they move on. Yes, Mars is going to move on a little bit quicker, but they're both finishing a process and they're both finishing a chapter of their cycle and of their path here. So I'm wondering about a physical and emotional connection or an integration or a cohesion before Mars moves into the sign of Aries, the place where it really strengthens and where it's really empowered. So the emotional life or the emotional aspect coming through from the water sign of the sign of Pisces, and then bringing that together with the physical aspects that we get in earthly Taurus here. I'm thinking about an emotional embodiment when these two planets are coming together. Uranus is finishing that long stay in earthy Taurus, where the revolutions and the changes maybe have been tangible in some sort of way. Whether it's been our routines, whether it's been something related to our body, the way our body reacts to, related to our consumptions or our aesthetics, related to comfort and steadiness in some sort of way. Maybe the change in the revolution has been bringing stability, has been wanting to bring some sort of ease and some sort of comfort and enjoyment in the Taurus area of our chart as things are shifting and things are changing here. So there's a real embodiment quality of the revolution, of the shifting, of the changing in the sign of Taurus for Uranus. Mars pinging that with a sextile brings some motivation, some drive, some ambition from the emotional aspect, from the water sign, right? So maybe collecting and even reflecting on the process that Uranus has went through in the sign of Taurus, reflecting and processing and contemplating is a very Piscean type thing, may come up here for some of us. But the shifts that have come through in the sign of Taurus, are really about us owning these things within ourselves, which is embodiment, right? Taurus is a physical earthly sign of Venus. It likes to enjoy, it wants things to be harmonious, but in the physical form, right? When you think more air sign relational, then you start to get into the Venus area of Libra here. These two planets are energizing, empowering, brave, and they both like to think outside of the box and act outside of normal character, right? They both like to keep us on our toes here. Things can change quickly. Understandings can come through when we're talking about Uranus, messages, insights blasting through really, really quickly, making us move in different ways than we haven't necessarily moved before. This is a subtle aspect, but these are not subtle planets. So I see this as a boost for both planets, even if it's kind of subtle where we don't really notice it until it's already kind of in the space, right? You really start to feel the connection between the physical realm and the emotional realm, and then you really start to viscerally feel it within your body, and then you embody it, and then you bring it outwardly, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's Mars Uranus. Or maybe you don't necessarily know the transits, but you're like, oh, this is really showing itself in some sort of way here. And then just after Mars moves through that sextile with Uranus, it's going to move Thursday into the sign of Aries. So the moon is still in Mars's exaltation when Mars moves into the sign of Aries. So this is where I say we really have this Mars flavored week here, even with that square from Sun Jupiter from the sign of Aries from Mars's sign, and it being a square, which is of the nature of Mars. Feels like there's a lot of echo of Mars, which is movement, action, drive, motivation, challenges to overcome, spaces that we make us want to be able to move from those spaces. Those are the themes that we have coming through here this week. So this transit will take us through mid-May, where Mars will then move into the sign of Taurus. So from now until the middle of May, we have a strong Mars. We have a brave, bold, fast-acting Mars in the sign of Aries, where it's quick to start and not afraid to go out alone and blaze its own path. We get initiators and inspirers. We get leaders in the sign of Aries, right? That are not afraid to do the hard things or go down a different path than other people have. When Mars is in the sign of Aries, I like to remember that fire illuminates and can inspire, but it can also incinerate. Mars in Aries moves really, really quickly. And, Aries doesn't always think things through. Sustainability is of a concern. It's a cardinal sign, it's a fire sign, it's Mars' sign. So starting and initiating and hitting the ground running is really easy to do. The follow through and the sustainability without maybe having things fully planned out is a little bit more difficult. It's much more act now, consider consequences later. And then if we look at the fact that Mars is going to instantly be met with Neptune and Saturn, and then shortly thereafter, it's going to come into a triple conjunction with Saturn, Mercury, and Mars all coming together. We're going to talk about that next week. It's going to be sextiling Pluto at the time of the new moon, and it's also going to be moving into a square with Jupiter, just like the sun has moved through the square. So that's a lot of Mars, a lot that Mars will activate here, and it may speak loudly in its familiar space of Aries. So if there's actions that need to be take place, or if this is a great time to start something, initiate something, if you need to have a little bit of courageous action, you need a little bit of liquid courage and a little bit of bravery behind your back, right? Mars in the sign of Aries can do that for you. Great time to take action where it's needed. but also as a little bit of a heads up, watching for overheating, watching for inflammatory responses of all kinds, right? Within our own self and then within, you know, the external world around us. Pots can boil over if they're not watched. So, you know, just kind of keeping that in mind here. So I think that this Mars transit through Aries is going to be an interesting one. Again, instantly met with Neptune, Saturn. Mercury is going to make its way in there, and it's pinged into the lunation that we have coming here too. So I think there's quite a punch to be packed this week as far as drive, initiation, and moving forward, really taking a forward type action in some sort of way. From Sun and Jupiter coming together and really challenging us to bring forward whatever has been working within the Cancer area of our house, of our chart, the Cancer house of our chart, and within those themes, however those have been coming up for you. Mars and Uranus gives us a little extra boost. It gives a little bit of extra energy and maybe a little bit of a speed up here. And it's an empowering moment for Mars just before it moves into the sign of Aries, where it's empowered. The moon is reciprocal of all of that and emphasizing the Mars being in the sign of Cancer the sign of Capricorn, Mars's exaltation at the time. So this is a movement week. This is a week of drive and ambition and forward energy, even if it's met with some misunderstandings or some tensions in some sort of way. We will break down Mars moving across Neptune and Saturn in next week's video, but the possibility of things not being clear as we take these actions, right? Moving forward and maybe either just trusting that spirit from within us in the most positive type of way, or being deceived in some sort of way, or moving in a way that ends up being a little bit illusory and we don't find ourselves ending up quite at the space that we thought we were going to find ourselves in. Borders, boundaries, limitations, pushing up against those limitations here as Mars moves into the sign of Aries is definitely on the table here this week. So if you have things to do, if you have things to start and initiate that you've been kind of dragging your feet on, maybe this is the week where you can start and initiate some of that. Just being mindful of the Neptunian aspect as well. Really feeling things deep from within, but are they clear? Are we on the right path, right? And then sometimes it's like, are we ever on the right path? How do we ever know if we're on the right path, right? Kind of like that. So that's Thursday. And then that's the end of our aspects for the week. Friday, we'll follow the moon from Capricorn into the sign of Aquarius. And then that Aquarian moon will take us into Saturday, April 11th. I hope everybody has an absolutely wonderful week. This is what I have for you this week. Like I said, there will not be a meditation this week, Sunday, April 5th, but join us next week, the following week. So we're going to be looking at, what day is that? We're looking at April 12th. I will see you all April 12th for our live meditation. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Come back next week, watch the video, and then come to the live meditation. Really, the goal with the meditation is to take the astrology, take the transits, bring it down to a personal level, bring it down to a space where you can cultivate relationships with the energy around us and really, really digging into it and leaning into it in a silent, contemplative space after we do a little bit of talking about it. So, hope everybody has an absolutely wonderful week. Take care, find some moves, and enjoy the moving energy. All right, take care. Bye.